Well, yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I'm Robert Johnson. I'm the founder of MicroBoost. It's a functional mushroom brand. No psychedelics in that brand, but I do write about psychedelics for Rolling Stone, as well as all different types of mushrooms. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you guys about all things mushrooms today.
So I guess I'll start. What's the purpose of a mushroom without a psychedelic?
Yeah, great question. So, the Chinese have been using functional mushrooms in medicine for 5,000 years. Evidence of, guys ever heard of Otzi, the Iceman? It's like one of the most preserved, oldest cavemen that archaeologists found. And in his little satchel, he's called the Iceman because his body was preserved in ice. And in his stomach and in his little satchel, they found functional mushrooms, which the archaeologists theorized, he was using as some sort of medicine or antibiotic. So the mushrooms have been used, by
Well,
humans
sorry to
for
interrupt. Do mushrooms have those properties? They can be used as antibiotics?
Yep.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with MicroBoost, we work with five different types of functional mushrooms. The number one, maybe the most popular one right now in the mushroom supplement world is lion's mane. I think one of the reasons why mushrooms are having such a moment, the functional ones, is because of the media attention for psychedelic mushrooms, right? And people now are taking psychedelic mushrooms on a microdose level, which has become, nearly mainstream. And the idea is not to, have the crazy visions that are on Dan's background, but actually to like grow your brain, right? And so people are microdosing so they can have higher cognitive function, also improve their mood. And what it technically does in the brain is creating new neural pathways through a couple of different things called neurogenesis, which is the formation of new brain cells, and then neuroplasticity, which is the formation of new neural connections. To do this on an extreme level, right, new neural connections can be experienced as something called synesthesia, right? That's when you can see music or taste colors, right? Your senses are crossed in these extreme ways that aren't normal to our normal consciousness. But, on a smaller microdosing level, people are taking them and just, finding more improved mood, more energy, more attention and focus. And lion's mane has those same properties. Now, if you take, 5 grams of lion's mane, you're not going to, see your dead grandma, but you will have that neuroplasticity effects. And in fact, they even work synergistically together, both lion's mane and psilocybin mushrooms. But all these different mushrooms, some of the other ones we work with include cordyceps. Athletes use it to get more oxygen into their lungs. So consequently, between the energy and the VO2 enhancing, it's really great pre-workout. And then reishi is known by the Chinese as the mushroom of immortality, has anti-cancer, antibiotic, anti-inflammatory properties to it. So yeah, I mean, it's really us in the West that are just now catching up to the medicinal properties of these mushrooms that have been used by other countries, civilizations for thousands of years, even prehistory in the case of Otzi the Iceman.
Yeah, and fungi, fungi have been around before humans, before bacteria. They're saying fungi were here, and the fungi have a very special role in evolution. But I'm curious, Robert, these when you microdose, I know there's different lines and different species. On the serotonin 5-HT pathway, do any of them activate these receptors?
That's a good question, and I as a formulator, I know that we have used 5-HTP and experimented with it in different formulas that different companies come to me for, and I know that 5-HTP is often used prior to and after like an MDMA experience, and that's because of the regenerative properties it has on your serotonin receptor recovery, or as a way to, minimize overstimulation or overexertion of your serotonin receptors, as far as I understand. But I wouldn't claim to be an expert on 5-HTP.
Yeah, and it's crazy how they get, I mean, I'm drawing on my experience with psilocybin, but how it acts as a diuretic as well, which is kind of an unintended consequence. It's probably your body trying to get rid of the hallucination, honestly. Like, how do I metabolize this thing faster? I don't want to be seeing all this, because I know when I go on trips, I gotta go to the bathroom like every 10 minutes on the shrooms. Is there anything like that with the microdosing, or any reports of that? Urinary frequency?
Your gut microbiome, and whatever's going on in your body. I think it all affects people differently. When I first moved to LA here like 16 years ago, I had just moved with a creative writing, and so my first job here in LA was ghostwriter. It was like, opens for like Deepak Chopra, and just talks about, how spirituality and Western medicine can find, some common ground. And so the book I was writing, redwood forest, and it was really an analogy for family. But in my research and everything that I found really interesting about it, redwood trees have an interconnected root system. There's only a few trees that have this interconnection between them that allows them to share information, nutrients, into all different parts of the forest as it's needed. And as I got into mushrooms a few years ago, and the more I've been researching and studying them, mycelium, or the root system of the mushroom, people sometimes call it the woods wide web, right? Because mycelium really contains all the information of an ecosystem. You discover that mushroom mycelium, 50 words, right? They really information underground, but when a tree falls or an animal dies in the forest, mushrooms are really transformed to turn that decay into new life. And so I say all this as a way to answer your question, that my belief is, and I'm really fascinated and so excited about psychedelics and mushrooms being so well funded now for more research to go into them. But my hypothesis is that kind of the same way that the mushrooms know what parts of the forest need what or information, I think they kind of work with humans that way as well, right? So just an anecdotal experience, a lot of people say a lot of different things. I mean, for me, that anecdotes of psychonauts that are repeatedly told over the past hundreds, thousands of years are now being used as the hypothesis for some of these multi-million-dollar, VC-backed research experiments. And it not only is telling us stuff about mushrooms and psilocybin and other psychedelics, but really, I think, pointing towards discoveries and proving empirical evidence about our consciousness. I think the kind of mystic is my message being chopped up.
Yeah, you're not audible there for about 20 seconds.
Oh, okay.
It's a little bit like coming out of a mushroom high, getting like, it's, to me, ever since I got into fungi and plants as well, but fungi were actually here before, which is, people underestimate that, man. Like, everyone thinks of plants and animals. Well, fungi were here before all of that. They were here first.
Yeah. There are theories that around the time of the Cambrian explosion, there was a lot of life under the water of our planet, but the surface, the land of Earth, was primarily that the theory is that, mushroom spores can survive the depths of space, right? And so the theory is that, an asteroid or something from space carrying these mushroom spores lands and hits the rock. And then over the course of, hundreds of millions of years, those spores create the mycelium, which actually breaks up the rock of planet Earth, and over hundreds of millions of years becomes soil and then becomes trees and life on the surface of the planet. So
Yeah.
I think, that mushrooms may be from outer space, and
They've got a huge
all life on the surface of the Earth.
huge role in cleaning up and decomposition, and it's crazy how technology, even when it doesn't try nature, Redwood Wi-Fi network basically, and fungi have this as well. There's actually some research going on as far as deciphering these signals and essentially deciphering the language of mushrooms and plants and fungi and things like that. And just like they're doing with animals, they're trying. The theory is we'll be able to communicate with them, or at least have a better idea of what they want soon. So it'd be kind of interesting, like in a way, when anyone takes a mushroom for whatever purpose, whether it's to have a trip or some therapeutic effect, they're, like you said, they know, they sort of know, or at least the theory is they know where you're lacking. It'd be interesting for us to be able to tap into their needs or wants. Just to have needs or wants. I don't know. We're not fungi, so we don't understand their world. It would be kind of interesting 50 years from now if we can actually communicate with them as well.
Yeah, I mean, at mushroom events and conferences that I go to, I definitely meet a lot of people that their message that they're receiving from the mushrooms is grow more mushrooms and eat more mushrooms. So,
Of course.
everybody hears that voice differently, but
that would be consistent with evolution. Like, yeah, we want we want to proliferate.
So, I'm going to come at this from I'm neutral on this topic. So I'm going to come from the negative side a little bit, if that's okay.
Great, please.
So how similar are mushrooms to, say, LSD? I remember when I was in high school and friends would get a hit of LSD. I would hear rumors you take 5 hits of LSD or 10 hits of LSD and you will never mentally recover. How similar, I don't even know if that's true, but that's what they would say, right? So, how similar is mushrooms to LSD?
Well, I would say like the biggest similarities between when LSD was first being used for psychotherapy. So, right, like in the
70s, right? 60s?
Well, and in the 50s is really when it started. So Sandoz Laboratories is the pharmaceutical company that first was distributing and making LSD after Albert Hofmann accidentally discovered it. And so they were sending LSD to psychotherapists and encouraging them to try it because of just like, I think the can get to breakthroughs. I think it's just really kind of like a shortcut. And so in the 50s, there were thousands of papers that were written by psychotherapists about their experiments or, their experiences with giving LSD to their patients, and how they described, what took, 3-5 years was now being that same amount of progress was happening in 1 or 2 or 3 sessions. And there were international conferences for psychotherapists specifically about LSD, and a lot of research that was going into it. And it wasn't until the Prohibition and Richard Nixon that all of that research stopped. Right. And so, and now also, another similarity is, like you say, the propaganda that was illegal to make or sell LSD, but also to scare everybody into ever considering trying it from a black market source as well. So, I mean, the most recent Rolling Stone article I'm kind of working and editing right now is a similar thing about mushrooms. Well, the past about 7 years now, almost all media headlines have been about how mushrooms are great. They're this kind of panacea, cure-all, and can heal just about anything. But now, and just like the media tends to do, there was a company that was distributing chocolate bars made with a synthesized version of psilocybin, just in like smoke shops and stuff, and people got sick or reportedly got sick from it. And so now just the you previously thought was great for you.
If it bleeds, it leads.
Exactly. But now I think the big similarity between LSD in the 50s and psilocybin mushrooms now is that because the laws are changing, or at least moving in that direction, now more research and funding is going back into studying them, because we basically lost about 60 years while this prohibition was going on.
Well, it's been Schedule 1 that is not allowed to have research done, which is thankfully recently changed. I'm not opposed to that at all. Where I do have some opposition, I see using these things for somebody with detrimental or harmful brain chemistry, negative or harmful mental states, right? I could see what, in other words, I guess, why mess around with your brain chemistry, right? When you don't suffer from any of these things, right? Depression, PTSD, any of those things.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, and it's definitely not something to take lightly. And what you talk about is totally true. If you're gonna create new neural pathways in your brain, that could go good or not so good, right? And my background before I got into mushrooms was cannabis, right? And so we saw a very similar path towards legalization of cannabis, where it started with just medical patients, right? If someone has terminally ill cancer or with
Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, any of those things, absolutely.
Right. So as cannabis activists, we were rolling those old ladies out into city council, and veterans.
There you go.
Veterans with PTSD are a very bipartisan group of people. No one wants to say we shouldn't help veterans have mental health or better mental health.
Absolutely.
But I mean, it really is just a stepping stone, towards legalization. And I think the truth of it is it's not good for everybody. You're 100% right on that. But the same way that I think cannabis is really good for a lot more people than just, Parkinson's and terminally ill patients, there's a lot of benefits to just regular people. And the same thing for mushrooms. And, I think one of the reasons why they're so in the mainstream right now is because of COVID. And we all kind of experienced not only, a couple of years of, maybe PTSD that we're recovering from with that experience. We also had to just like sit down and shut up for a while. And I think we had to, our people just, maybe even all involuntarily started thinking more inwards, right? So I think that everybody is always looking to be happier and healthier and understand, their life and their meaning here. And so I think that that's pretty universal. But you're totally right. Like people with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia and stuff should probably definitely not take something that's going to, play around in their brains.
So marijuana has some hallucinogenic properties, and then mushrooms a little more so, and then LSD I would assume more than mushrooms, right? So they all kind of have the same effect, just more potency, correct or no?
Yeah, I mean LSD I would say is definitely stronger than mushrooms, especially when you consider that it's measured in micrograms. 100 micrograms is a full dose, whereas it's 3 or 4 grams of mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
But, my background also with cannabis was in edibles manufacturing, right? So in 2008, when you would go into a dispensary in California and you wanted to buy a brownie, a cannabis brownie, you'd look and you'd try and gauge, like, how strong is this going to be? What should I expect? And everybody kind of had their own arbitrary unit of measurement. They would say, this is wicked strong. And and consequently, almost everybody had a similar experience with cannabis edibles. I always like to joke that weed edibles don't work until you talk shit about them, right? You take a bite, you're like, this
doesn't do anything until an hour later.
Yeah, this is a weak batch. I don't think it's working. Maybe I should eat some more.
Yeah.
And then it's way too much, right? And so in California in 2010, legalization was first on the ballot for cannabis, and it ended up losing. It was a midterm election, and it wasn't great.
Big turnout.
But at that time, the proposal was maybe to eliminate edibles. And that was because the bureaucrats that are writing these laws didn't really understand how they could regulate. First of all, they're going to be creating a whole new thing to regulate cannabis, but then food falls under the FDA. So they were like, I don't know if we can do cannabis food. Me and my business partners. So, that would have meant the end of our business if legalization happened and edibles were outlawed. So we started a trade association for edibles manufacturers. And there was a lab in Oakland called Steep Hill that was testing. They're like pioneers, and one of the first labs that was testing the amount of THC or CBD and different cannabinoids in cannabis. And we contacted them and we said, we want to start this trade association. And the first rule of our Fight Club is that you have to test every batch of edibles, right? And so our idea was we wanted to make it, the most medicinal thing in the sense that it's predictable, repeatable, consistent, and safe. And so that's why today, edibles, like a gummy will say 10 milligrams of THC, and that's really specific. Mm-hmm. And so you can really find your dose. My whole career in if we want to legitimize them and actually call them medicine, then they have to be measured in such a specific way that people could really find their dose, right? And so I think, a small super measured dose of LSD could be comparable to, a larger dose of mushrooms. But the point is just finding that right amount that, gives you what you're going for.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess one last negative, or more from the negative side, question. So marijuana, this is my opinion, marijuana is harmful, but less so than alcohol. It has some harmful properties, especially if you smoke it. If you ingest it, less so, but it still can be harmful in a number of different ways, but much less than alcohol. And there is no research really to speak of in terms of long-term use. What do you see in terms of long-term use from mushrooms and side effects?
Well, I mean, I think that the real point here, and the thing that most Americans agree on now, is that drug prohibition has failed.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Adults are going to, take drugs whether or not they're legal or not.
Well, I'm sorry to cut you off. I would just add, if we actually, which we don't, lived in a free country, it's up to the adult. It's up to the adult to decide what they do for themselves.
Right. And so I think your question, the way I answer it that way, is the more research that's done, I think the more we will discover about positive and negative long-term effects, or mushrooms, LSD, whatever it is. But until that research is able to be done, it's all just anecdotal, whether, you saw God and had the most beautiful relationship or experience of your life, or, you developed schizophrenia or something.
Sure.
That wasn't previously there.
So jury's still out on long-term effects. Is what I hear you saying. Would you agree with my analysis of alcohol and marijuana? Marijuana has some harmful qualities, but less so than alcohol. Would you agree with that?
Totally. And that's what we were arguing with edibles. It's like, how are you going to legalize something and then force everybody to inhale it, with carcinogens? and then
Hmm.
call that medicine. And also too, yeah, my lawyer would always say, like, nobody ever smoked a joint and went home and beat their wife, you know.
Beat them for wanting to go lay down and do nothing, but hey, that's
Yeah, just
up to
play
those
Call of
two.
Duty all day.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think, yeah, we all agree regulators are not interested in our health. Um, if that were the case, there would be, all these estrogen generators out in the water and in the food supply and sea levels and sucralose and all these things would be banned if our health was really their concern. What is their concern is, I believe, enlightenment to some extent. So I'm a relatively recent psilocybin user, and I could see how it has a profound effect on people's lives. And I had no PTSD or really much of a traumatic. Government is a human construct, and these chemicals are not. Like they were put here for a reason. LSD's synthetically manufactured, but it comes from a fungus, if I believe also, and then it's mixed with another chemical. But psilocybin is as natural as you can get. Ayahuasca is as natural as you can get. So I think the real concern is not our health. That's ridiculous to think. It's the fact that we, in a way, unlock ourselves from the system. And I think that's a very dangerous thing for governments, and that's something they want to preserve.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's definitely everyone's opinion about why Nixon outlawed cannabis and LSD and mushrooms. You know, the main people that were taking it were anti-war, anti-capitalism, anti-establishment, and he
Yep.
named them the number one public threat to.
And no one ever saw God drinking beer, drinking alcohol. I mean, you're not getting on that high of a vibration. You're getting subdued. It's a downer. There's no enlightenment at all with alcohol. Matter of fact, the moment of clarity comes from when you start sobering up on alcohol. It's the complete
Yeah.
opposite of these things.
So, kind of like along that line, the difference between the legal is the pharmaceutical companies are very interested in psychedelics as well, and they're making their own novel compounds and studying them with double-blind tests to kind of find a way to produce this and capitalize from it. Whereas with cannabis, synthesized cannabis already has existed since the 70s. It's called Marinol, and is never a really popular product. So my concern as kind of a conspiracy guy, or along the lines of what you're saying, is that why is the government now allowing these substances to move towards legalization? And my fear is that it will be co-opted in such a way and still used as a method of control. But that is, well, cannabis in my opinion is like the greatest grassroots activism of our generation, right? The government didn't want cannabis legal, but now it is in over 40 plus states. And that was the effects of a lot of people in, state by state, starting in communities, really calling for this and asking for it. And I think one of the domino effects there is that as people try cannabis, or, the people smoked in the 60s and then became a lawyer and didn't do it for 40 years for fear of legal repercussions, smoking it again. And a lot of people are just like, man, this stuff is pretty great. What else has the government been lying to us about?
Everything.
Everything. I agree. Everything. I think both sides of political parties are waking up to. That's whole different tangent, maybe for another show. Chris, did you have other questions about microdosing? And I think the microdosing is something I want to try. My spiritualists who do the psilocybin with me, they do have microdosing, and they get it from Oaxaca, Mexico. They call it Niños Santos, the Holy Children. is what they call the mushrooms, magic mushrooms, basically. But they offer the microdosing as well, and they said that's good for daily use. And then when you want to have a trip, they recommend as often as you need. And there's something interesting about Latin America, specifically like Oaxaca, where there's more of a traditional indigenous. I don't know what it is about Western world. We like to be extreme about everything, like, and this is what Chris is getting to. Like, this is why there are people like Chris that say this is bad. It's because the Western world likes to maximize everything. Like, whereas in Oaxaca, where there's indigenous tribes that grew up with this stuff, this is not a something fun for them to do. Like, there's an element of respect around this. They're not doing it to get a trip. They're doing it to find meaning or to let go of something, especially when it comes to the harder stuff like ayahuasca. And I don't know what it is about Western society where we just take things and abuse the hell out of them. Like, what are your thoughts on this? It has a lot to do with industrialization. I mean, that's like the framework that the West has built is let's maximize output, right? Everything's about maximizing output.
Yeah, I definitely always joke about that, right? There's this one drug that comes from a toad, right? A psychedelic toad, and the
Bufo, yeah.
Bufo, or 5-MeO-DMT, right? And like we were talking about earlier, I think mushrooms and these toads, they evolved as a defense mechanism. That's why they have the psychedelic properties. In fact, like guys with the blow darts in the jungle would dip the arrow into the 5-MeO toad venom, so you could sedate your enemy and have them there laying on the ground freaking out. But I mean, this ayahuasca, there's a series on Netflix called Unwell, and it's kind of like the dark side of supplements and in this case psychedelic brew ayahuasca. And they were talking about some nasty things that happened down in South America, including a guy who stabbed a curandera, and then the villagers hung him when they discovered what he had done. And when they're interviewing the villagers and the people, I think the reason why Americans or Westerners go to such extremes, and the thing that they couldn't really relate to, is they're just like, man, these guys, they just have such pathologies. They have all of this angst and stress and part of their lives that we don't experience living down here in Peru and in paradise, and just part of that wasn't capitalism and monetizing every moment and stressing about that. And so I think just part of our Western civilization is what creates us to go to equal extremes to try and break that up.
Yeah, actually, somebody I know experienced that. Somebody on ayahuasca attacked them on their property. The person almost got shot. The homeowner came out with a gun when his wife was being attacked by this dude. The cops got there and arrested him. Found out later he was on ayahuasca. Yeah, I kind of agree with you in that vein, in terms of psychology of America is just entirely different than most of the rest of the world. It's just total stress 100% of the time. I don't disagree with that.
Sure. Elements in Mexico as well that are no different than the U.S., where it's go, 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 and then they go to these villages and everyone's relaxed. And like the way my spiritualist, when I went, the way they respect the mushroom, it's almost like, to a Westerner it seems theatrical, and then you realize they're not doing it for show. Like, this is actually, they're respecting this thing, and you should too. And it taught me about intentioning properly, because I haven't had any bad experiences, but I've seen people not intentioning or coming in with the wrong mindset and having bad trips. So that's something definitely to keep in mind. They tell you not to watch any scary movies 3 days before. Don't listen to any rap music. I'm a rap fan. And you know what, Chris? After doing the shroom, music. I'm getting back into it now. It's been a while, but you don't want to engage in that kind of negativity. Like the music they play there has a lot to do with it too. It's very spiritual, and the music syncs with the
Probably
outer
relaxing,
senses.
relaxing
Not
too.
just relaxing, it's like it's like choreographed to go with your trip. Like, I don't know, man.
Sure,
It has a profound effect.
you're listening to, say, killing people or, I'm gonna blow you away. That's probably not
Yeah.
a good thinking to if you're hallucinating, I would imagine. I,
But you know, man, like when I did my first trip, all right, just all I did was shrimp. You go in there, you know that you're in a trip, but kind of what you remember seems like it's real, at least for the first week. And real life felt fake. I actually felt viscerally like this is not the real world. The real world is what I saw when I was there for 2 hours. This
yeah,
is not the real world.
I don't think that's for me. I just
You
that's
know,
not
don't knock it till you try it,
that's
Robert. Let's
that's
get Chris.
that's not for me. I like dealing in reality. I'd like a break from it. I just don't know to that extent.
Yeah, I think I've been more and more interested in other occult things as well, just because of the studying of mushrooms, right? And I think it's also religion as well. It's also kind of seeking the same thing that people are that are taking mushrooms, right? And being able to explainable. And that's why I find it, the implications of some of these tests that are being done really fascinating, because an anecdotal mushroom tripper, Chris, might tell you that exactly what Dan is saying, right? That the veil was lifted and I saw the world for how it really was. And what these scientists are trying to prove is that maybe that's there all the time. If this tool allows us to see it, but like the ability to communicate telepathically, for example, I think is something that maybe we have the ability to do. And anecdotally, whether you're tripping or not tripping, I think, married couples, best friends, are able to communicate in ways that are nonverbal, for example, or, people having have a experience of deja vu because, you feel like I've remembered this before.
Absolutely.
And no
You ever been
psychedelics are.
in a crowded room? I'm talking hundreds of people, and then you get this weird sense someone's looking at you, and you try to scan, then you find somebody staring at you. You're like, I felt this motherfucker staring at me in this crowded room.
Yeah. So, I mean, the sixth sense is something that, we've always been talking about. Religions talk about it, and the occult, the aura readers, et cetera. And so I think that all this stuff is kind of grouped into this category of maybe hippie, mumbo jumbo. But that's why I find it so interesting that now scientists are taking the hippie
Too,
mumbo
man.
jumbo.
That I'm reading this book by Peter Thiel called Zero to One. He's saying, and he argues a compelling argument. The reason why we're experiencing records of depression in the Western world is because people believe that everything that can be discovered, and so they have no purpose. So there's three categories: easy to master, the difficult to master and understand, and the impossible. And people are deferring to easy or impossible. No one's going after difficult because they think, okay, well, that's everything that's known about this is already known. Therefore, there's nothing to do. Therefore, there's no work to try. Therefore, I'm going to do nothing and be depressed. And he says people need to not default to impossible, but strive to working difficult. And the church does a very bad job of this.
But that
Everything is easily explained. Like a 5-year-old can understand God said to do this, so I gotta do this. Or, well, that's impossible to understand and we never will. That's just God's grace. Nobody wants to go down that difficult path, and that's what science actually is.
So that sounds like the same thing as the fourth turning, really. When there isn't a struggle, people actually struggle. They need the struggle.
That's a good one. And the shrooms make you struggle.
Well, the human soul needs a struggle. They can't be sitting doing nothing. Right?
I like that.
So yeah, I mean, I think he's saying the same thing.
And what causes depression? Serotonin. What do these things act on? Serotonin receptors.
Yeah, what's really interesting, I started a on patients at the University of New Mexico from 1990 to 1995 and did these long trips with them, 60 different people over the course of 5 years. And now there is a company, it's called DMTX, right? And they're basing a lot of their theories based on this book and this research. And they believe because people under DMT have see similar sort of beings, visit a similar place that they're describing, that perhaps this is actually a world that exists that people can travel to. And so there's this company that is spending $5 to $10 million a quarter to act as a cartographer for the DMT universe.
Wow.
And try and create an actual topographical multiple people are all visiting and experiencing. And then even putting two people under, in DMT trips, typically when you smoke it lasts 10, 15 minutes. But with the intravenous drip, they're extending it to 10, 12 hours, putting people in different rooms under at the same time and trying to meet on this astral plane. So it's really interesting. And the one thing that I get back to, and it's in this book and pretty much all research about psychedelics, is what you talked about, serotonin, which kind of regulates our happiness, is produced in the pineal gland in our brain. Also melatonin, which regulates, our transition between asleep and awake, is created in the pineal gland. DMT naturally occurs in our body twice, when we're born and when we die. And also this book talks about how pregnant women have a DMT surge in their bodies on the 49th day of their pregnancy. Without exception. And his theory is that this is the entrance of the soul into the fetus. So it's a really fascinating book. He even has a theory that alien abduction experiences are explained by an accidental release of DMT in our brains. But the point is that all of these things are coming from the pineal gland, right? Psilocybin molecularly is almost identical to serotonin, melatonin. All these things are what are called isomers, where they have the same atoms. They're just arranged in different ways. And so that gland in our brain, I think, is really regulating our ability to travel between dimensions, even if we just consider being asleep, being awake. And when you're on ayahuasca, the brain studies, brain scans that happen show that there's parts of the brain that are lit up only when we're awake, but also parts of the brain that are lit up only when we're asleep. And anecdotally, that seems to be what a lot of people are describing, almost like walking around in their jungle, they're having a lucid dream with instant manifestation and being able to, speak to dead relatives as if they were there standing in front of them. And so, I agree with Chris too. I think one of the real dangers is the media attention making everyone feel like there's nothing harmful about this. It's nothing but good things that can come from it. It's extremely powerful tool. All these things we're talking about are the most powerful ways to, shorten that process, shorten the process to insanity, perhaps. So, I think anyone taking it lightly, is that would be really dangerous. So,
yeah.
I'm sorry. In that vein, you're actually an excellent person to ask this question of. I haven't been to Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, specifically Skid Road, in quite some time. The last time I was there, it seemed like there was miles of tents and homeless people, and most of those people are either drug addicts or mentally ill, right? Or a combination of both. So while I'm very libertarian on the thought of drugs, and I think it's up to the individual, what drugs lead a person to that point, right? Alcohol is a big factor, but some drugs are too. What drugs should all drugs be legal? Should all drugs have others that will lead a person to that place where they just don't give a shit about anything, right? And
Well,
they're not beneficial in any way to themselves or society.
there's a guy, his name is Dr. Carl Hart, that has some interesting ideas about which drugs are legal or which ones should be legal or shouldn't be legal. And he believes that most drug laws are inspired by racism, and that the making extreme penalties for crack versus cocaine or meth, or just like it's really our white privilege right now to say, like, we should make cannabis legal and we should make psilocybin legal, but crystal meth or heroin, these are still super dangerous things, and should throw the book at people. And crystal meth is serious to your health, but it is an interesting idea that it is used as a way to be able to police minorities in large respect. But I think that the homeless situation is also largely created by government. Like in the 80s, Reagan made changes so that state-funded mental institutes, if you don't have your own, parent or somebody that is actually funding you to be there, it's the law that after 30 days, like, you're turned back out into the street. And so
asylums definitely need to make a comeback.
Yeah.
Institutionalized people should definitely be institutionalized, in my opinion.
Well, be careful what you wish for. They'll start putting
possibility, but I mean, these people are not served living on the streets. They're just not. It's
right.
They're like animals.
Well, I've always thought, and even my dad, Chris, who is a psychiatrist.
He's agreed
but
that institutions need to make a comeback.
But he's always played around with me, and it's like, I know it's a thought experiment, but he probably doesn't believe it, but maybe there's something there. What if the schizophrenics are actually, like, they don't need drugs? They actually are tuned into this stuff already, and us normal people have to take these things to get tuned in. And so if you are one of those people that takes this stuff, you're going to short circuit your systems. And that could be the case too. Like, what's to say, just because we've created an organizational society where it behooves us to act in these senses, doesn't mean that the universe works that way. Like, maybe the schizophrenics have the talent that we all have to take substances for.
I mean, that's certainly a possibility. I think anything's possible. I just think that's not likely, but possible most certainly. But I was just curious, Robert. So, are there drugs that in your opinion, that are harmful to society?
100%. And like Dan was saying too, just like you put something even non-harmful in a Westerner's hand, and they'll find a way to
make it harmful.
Sure. Like, when we were campaigning for cannabis edibles and trying to prevent them from being banned. I just want to thank both of you guys. This is a really great conversation, and I appreciate the skepticism and the pushback too, right? Like, because there's so many mushroom conferences or panels that I'll go and see, and everybody, just describes it all in a really similar way. And I think, like, challenging these assumptions or these, like, really new ideas is how we get to understand them better. So as a cool dynamic between the two, you guys.